Hello everybody, it's Sarah and welcome to day 17 of Bookmas. And since it is the 17th today, that means like Christmas is a week away from now, which means I'm starting to get stressed with both doing Bookmas as well as my Christmas presents, because I am one of those stupid people who decides to DIY a lot for Christmas presents. Which, you know, DIYing stuff is a lot easier for birthday presents because you only have to DIY one thing, whereas for Christmas you have like your whole family you want to give stuff to, obviously. And so yeah, to get two things out of the way at once, I decided to, for this video today, have a very casual chit-chat discussion video, and while I talk about my thoughts, I'm gonna crochet my present for my little sister. So that's what we're gonna do. By the way, this wool, I mean it's not really wool, but this thing is the softest thing ever, and I'm gonna crochet a hat for my little sister. But anyway, what do I want to talk about today? Today I want to talk about reviewing and rating books. Because on the one hand, I think I've never done a video kind of explaining how I rate books. But I also wanted to talk about reviewing in the same video because for some reason I feel like there's a lot of misconception about reviews and book ratings and misconceptions about them being objective, which I call bullshit on. I think there's nothing less objective than book reviews. And let's start with reviews. Let's start with that. I think that yes, book reviews can be objective. If you're someone who has been educated in how to properly critique literary novels on their literary merit and so on. But first of all, I think most of us on Booktube are amateurs. And I mean, maybe amateurs isn't the right word, but like our education isn't necessarily an academic education, and of course you can talk about the value of academia when it comes to art and so on, but our education doesn't come from like educating ourselves on like an academic level, but our education comes from reading a lot. And because of that, we learn about certain things like naturally. And so that's the first thing that I think why we're not necessarily the right people to give objective reviews on a literary merit of a novel. But then the second thing is, and I've talked about that in my Problems with the YA Community video, and I will leave that link down below and up there. The second thing is that I just think that there are certain genres and certain books where I don't necessarily think the literary merit is in the foreground, like YA being the most obvious choice. And I don't mean with that those books have any less value on a literary level compared to, you know, classics or whatever. But I just think that, you know, entertainment is the main thing about those books. And entertainment is something that is, again, very subjective. And so I think on Booktube it's very important to understand that reviews very much are subjective. It is what it is. And I try to say that usually in my reviews. I mean, I don't try to necessarily spell it out always, but I do often say phrases within my reviews like, I thought that was negative, or I thought that was positive. And even just in the latest review I filmed, which was Black Sun, which hasn't been uploaded yet, that's gonna come at the end of December, I talked about how in that book you're pretty much thrown into the story without any explanations on the world building and whatever. And I talked about that kind of within the negatives section of the book, even though I personally didn't necessarily think that was a negative, but just because I feel like that's something that a lot of people might dislike. And so, you know, you can see just on that example how subjective a lot of things are. That's also why I don't like especially the terms it's a slow book or it's a fast-paced book. Because within this often very YA-focused space of Booktube, I find that the adjective of slow is often used in a negative way, while the adjective of fast-paced is used in a very positive way. But again, that's something that depends so much on what you just personally prefer. And I certainly personally have books where I found they were slow, and where them being slow meant that nothing happened. But I also had books like, for example, my main example for that is The Queens of Inishlia by Tessa Gretton. That book is incredibly slow and doesn't have a lot of action, but I think that's just what makes this book so good, because the slowness gives it time to be a very introspective book and gives it time to properly explore the characters and so on. And then on the other hand, when it comes to fast-paced, I have found that a lot of times now fast-paced for me can be very negative. For me, fast-paced is a positive adjective when it comes to long books, like Brandon Sanderson's books, for example. If you are past the 500, 600 page marker, then fast-paced, I think, is a very positive adjective. For me personally, I enjoy a long, fast-paced book. However, I've also recently read a YA novel, which was The Dark Tide, which was very fast-paced as well, but because it was a very short book, it was barely over 300 pages, I found that the fast pace led to me not really falling into the story, not really having any time to connect to these characters and so on. But I'm sure that a lot of other people love the fast pace of YA. I just personally tend to not enjoy YA as much anymore because it is so fast paced, but often very short stories. And so I think, just to come back to reviews, I think that within reviews we need to start talking more about what we personally enjoyed or didn't enjoy about the book. And I don't think that just because we cannot be objective with reviews, that, or objectively say if a book is good or not, that we shouldn't do reviews. But I think we need to just, as watchers of reviews as well as reviewers, I think we need to become clearer on that what we're talking about isn't necessarily an objective view of the book, but more a subjective view of the tastes of the reviewer. And I think because of that, it's also so important to find reviewers who either very much have the same taste like you or the exact contrary taste like you. Because I have seen a lot of people who said they watch certain reviewers because they know if someone said they didn't like a book, they're probably gonna like it. And if they say they like a book, they're probably not gonna like it. And then also, I have certain reviewers who I know have same tastes like me. And I know if they enjoyed a book, I can very much trust them, at least when it comes to certain genres. And so, yeah, I think it's just important that we're more clear on the subjectivity of books. Although I do still think that there are certain things we can objectively say within reviews. I think we can usually say, okay, this book was slow-paced or fast-paced. Whether or not you're gonna like that is up to you or up to me in that matter as a reviewer. And then also something else when it comes to reviews where I've gotten a lot more hesitant about is reviewing genres that we're not familiar with. Because I feel personally most comfortable reviewing fantasy because I'm very familiar with the genre, I'm very familiar with the tropes, and I can, with a certain confidence say that even aside from just my own taste, I can tell if a book is well written or not. And well written, of course, can be subjective as well and is a lot of times subjective. But I still think that a well-written book still might not be for everyone or will not be for everyone. And a badly written book will still be the perfect book for some people. So again, these are kind of just subjective categories. But I'm very familiar within fantasy with the tropes, with the cliches, with everything. However, for example, and I had the trouble when I tried to talk about Mexican Gothic within my wrap-up. I, for example, never read horror, thrillers, anything like that. And because of that, it just ends up being kind of difficult to know whether or not you dislike a book just because you dislike the book, or whether or not you dislike a book because you just happen to dislike the genre as a whole. Maybe the book is one of the best books within the genre, but you just really don't like suspense stuff. Or like maybe you really enjoy a book within that genre, but for readers who read that genre a lot, it might be really tropey and really cliche. But because you're not familiar with the cliches, you can still be surprised by a really cliche twist, for example. And so that's also something where with reviews, I think we have to be careful, and above all, we always have to be honest with ourselves and with the people that watch our reviews. I don't know if that makes sense. But I don't know. I really don't like this, I don't know how to call it, but like, you know, this assumption that all reviews always have to be objective. Because of course I can sometimes tell that a book is really well written from a technical point of view, but at the same time, I just really didn't like the book. And that needs to be okay. And I can say that, okay, yeah, this book really wasn't for me. For example, I have that with Terry Pratchett, where I don't like his books, I don't like his writing style, but I can still acknowledge that he is an author who writes really well. And I just fucked up. Wow. That's why you don't crochet and talk at the same time. But now moving on to rating, which by the way, I'm just gonna say is a similar deal. I recently had a comment of someone on my Poppy War video, or one of my Poppy War videos, who was really butthurt that I gave the first book only 1 star because he thought that it didn't deserve just 1 star. Which objectively I might agree with, but at the same time I gotta say the same thing again. Ratings aren't objective, and I think we can try as much, or we can try to say as much as we want that ratings should be objective. I don't think they're ever gonna be objective. Because, you know, reviews aren't objective. Our tastes in books aren't objective. And also we might have a star rating system on Goodreads and on all the other like new sites, like what's it called? I forgot what the site is called, that are popping up. But really, everyone has their own way in which they rate books. Some people decide that like a 5-star book has to be absolutely perfect. Other people decide that a 5-star book is any book that they really enjoyed. Other people again think that a 3-star book is a bad book. And then some others say that a 3-star book is a solid book and is a book that they enjoyed. And we cannot know what system others use to rate books. And because of that, again, ratings, just like reviews, aren't objective. They're completely subjective. And that's actually what I use mostly for my rating system, is I do it a little bit willy-nilly. Like, for me, a 1-star book is a book that I hated. I absolutely hated. A 2-star book usually is a book that bored me a lot. So in a lot of ways, actually a 1-star rating for me is a better rating than a 2-star rating, because for a 1-star rating, you know, I at least feel something about the book. When it comes to a 2-star rating, I could just as well have not read the book. Then for me, 3-star ratings are so hard for me, because 3-star ratings for me can be books that, you know, I just didn't personally enjoy, but I see enough value in reading them that I gave them 3 stars. Or I really enjoyed, but at the same time I also see some solid problems with them. Or a 3-star rating might be, yeah, I actually enjoyed it, but I'm probably gonna forget about it next week. And so 3-star ratings for me are really hard to do. It's just like basically every book that I don't know what to rate, I give 3 stars. And then the same goes for half stars, by the way. Half stars for me are just whatever. If I feel like a 3-star rating is kind of too low, but a 4-star rating is too high, then I give a 3.5-star rating. Then for me, 4-star books are books that I really enjoyed either, but I have a few solid complaints about them. Or I sometimes have books where I don't really have any complaints about them, but at the same time I know these books aren't gonna stay with me for all that long, so I'm just gonna give them 4 stars. Or they're books that, you know, I maybe had a 3-star enjoyment, but at the same time they're just so remarkable from a technical standpoint that I end up giving them 4 stars, which is actually a lot of times what happens with literary fiction for me, where like emotionally I'm not that invested in the story, but at the same time I can just see a lot of really positive things about the writing of the book that I end up giving them 4 stars. And then for me the 5-star ratings are just books that I don't know, that have to touch something within me, whether that is intellectually or whether that is emotionally or whatever. They can't really have any concrete complaints for me. So a 5-star book for me is a book where I don't really have anything specific to complain about. And also additionally to that, a lot of times they're books that I love the writing a lot, because like beautiful writing is just something that brings me so much joy, so that like kind of counts as touching something within me, kind of on an emotional level but also on an intellectual level. And then the last thing for me, 5-star books are also often connected with a lot of nostalgia. So a lot of times authors that I connect with a lot of nostalgia are gonna be the authors of books that I end up giving 5 stars, no matter if the books are new or not. And then lastly, there's something I want to talk about within like kind of the objectivity, subjectivity, like when it comes to badly rating books, especially by BIPOC authors, especially with like the excuse of I didn't find this book relatable. Because I do think when it comes to rating that on the one hand there's this thing of, you know, personal enjoyment. If I don't enjoy a genre, then like it can probably be the best book within that genre, I'm still gonna give it 3 stars or lower. And the same kind of can be said for relatability. Like if you look for relatability within books, a lot of times if books specifically aren't written to be relatable to you, you probably won't be like that impressed by the books. Does that mean you're right to give them a low rating or not? And I'm kind of like torn on that, because as I said, in a perfect world, or like I see ratings as very objective. I think you're completely fine in giving the best book ever that changed a lot of people's like lives 1 star if you didn't enjoy it. However, it is also true that a lot of times, especially BIPOC authors, but also authors of LGBT books, have to fight with bad ratings on their books just for really bigoted reasons. And I think we do have to keep that in mind when we rate books as well. And like really examine our reasonings for rating books badly. And yeah, I think it's just a really hard decision, because like, am I right in rating a YA book lower because I don't enjoy YA? Like, is that okay for me to do? Shouldn't I just instead stop reading YA? And yeah, I don't know, because I do try to also not be objective in my ratings, because I'm still very subjective, but I also do try to keep in mind when I rate what was the intention of the book. And if it does whatever it intended to do well, then I will try to not rate it below 3 stars, unless I really had a visceral reaction to the book, like it was with the Poppy War. But to be honest, if I hadn't had such a visceral reaction to it, I probably would have rated it a lot better than I actually did. And so I think we should rate subjectively just for our own enjoyment, because after all, as I said, I don't think we should see ourselves as professional reviewers necessarily, but we should see ourselves as people who want to help other readers decide whether or not they're gonna enjoy a book. And I think we're gonna be able to do that the best, not by tearing books apart that we didn't like, and not by, you know, trying to be as objective as we possibly can, but just by giving our honest opinion and saying it as we saw it, and, you know, just telling people, hey, this is how I felt. Not this is how the book is, but this is how I felt about this book. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of what I wanted to say about reviewing and rating books, and why we need to, you know, get off our high horse a little bit. Because, I don't know, I think a lot of people who review just, I don't know, they just have their noses up in the air like this and just think way too much of their own opinion. Way too much. And I think once we stop trying to be so objective about our reviews, and once we start noticing that our enjoyment of books is completely subjective, I think then we're gonna start being less butthurt if someone gives a bad review to a book that we enjoyed. Or on the other hand, we will feel less need to tear people down, like intellectually or whatever we feel we're doing, for enjoying and loving books that we think are trash. Yeah, I don't know how to end this video, but those were just some random thoughts that I had on rating and reviewing books, because, you know, it's just not that serious. It's not that serious. You can be completely subjective in your ratings and your reviews, and you can still take into account certain things that might be a lot more objective, and you can still take into account your own reading tastes and maybe adjust for your reading tastes, like if a book just isn't for you or isn't meant for you. But yeah, that was it for this video. If you enjoyed it, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media and script stocks down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman per month, will also be linked down below, so go and check those out as well. Tell me in the comments all your thoughts on this topic. I have come quite a way farther with crocheting the little hat for my little sister. And with that said, I hope I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!